Hey first graders, let's check out another story from our series, Frog and Toad by Arnold Lobel. A Lost Button. Toad and Frog went for a long walk. They walked across a large meadow. They walked in the woods. They walked along the river. At last they went back home to Toad's house. "Oh, drat," said Toad. "Not only do my feet hurt, but I have lost one of the buttons on my jacket." "Don't worry," said Frog. "We will go back to all the places where we walked. We will soon find your button." They walked back to the large meadow. They began to look for the button in the tall grass. "Here is your button," cried Frog. "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button is black. My button was white." Toad put the black button in his pocket. So now we know that we're looking for a white button. A sparrow flew down. "Excuse me," said the sparrow. "Did you lose a button?" "I found one." "That is not my button," said Toad. "That button has 2 holes. My button had 4 holes." Toad put the button with 2 holes in his pocket. They went back to the woods and looked on the dark paths. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," cried Toad. "That button is small. My button was big." Toad put the small button in his pocket. So we know that Toad's button was white, it had 4 holes, and it's big. I wonder if they'll be able to find his missing button. A raccoon came out from behind the tree. "I heard that you were looking for a button," he said. "Here is one that I just found." "That is not my button," wailed Toad. "That button is square. My button was round." Toad put the square button in his pocket. Frog and Toad went back to the river. They looked for the button in the mud. "Here is your button," said Frog. "That is not my button," shouted Toad. "That button is thin. My button was thick." Toad put the thin button in his pocket. He was very angry. He jumped up and down and screamed, "The whole world is covered with buttons, and not one of them is mine." Toad ran home and slammed the door. There, on the floor, he saw his white, 4-holed, big, round, thick button. "Oh," said Toad. "It was here all the time. What a lot of trouble I have made for Frog." Oh my goodness, there's that lost button. It was at home all along. Toad took all of the buttons out of his pocket. He took his sewing box down from the shelf. Toad sewed the buttons all over his jacket. The next day, Toad gave his jacket to Frog. Frog thought it was beautiful. He put it on and jumped for joy. None of the buttons fell off. Toad had sewed them on very well. That was it. The end. That was the end of our story, first graders. What did you think of this Frog and Toad story? it can be really frustrating when you lose something that's very important to you. But Frog was being such an amazing friend by helping Toad look for his lost button. It's very silly that the button was at home the whole time, but it was also very nice of Toad to take all the buttons that they found and make a gift for Frog. That is a nice way for him to say thank you. Alright, first graders, I hope you enjoyed this Frog and Toad story. Tune in next week and we'll read the next story in our storybook called A Swim. Bye!